So I'm already losing my voice. You see, this is the nightmare with YouTube. You know, you commit to doing something and then something trips you up. You know, so well, luckily I've got a glass of water here, which actually is what leads me on to the first thing I want to talk about, which is water filters. A little while ago, I had a glass of water at my friend's house, and they've got this water filter. It's this big silver thing, stainless steel thing, and it was a Berkey. And she was raving about this, and I was like, yeah, I get that. You know, I'm tasting this water, and it just tastes amazing compared to my tap water at home. It turns out I can tell the difference between this filtered water and normal, straight out the tap water instantly, even by smell alone. I've had my family blind test me on this. It's the chlorine that is the main thing. If you take the chlorine out, it's just immediately obvious, and you realize we're just drinking this stuff. So there's a line of thinking there that got me interested in why we're drinking chlorine. It's like the most toxic, poisonous thing imaginable, and we're drinking it. We know it kills the bacteria in the pipes on the way to our house. You know, presumably it's carrying on killing the bacteria in our digestion. This is a bit of an alarm bell. So that was kind of a catalyst for this whole line of thinking. But just the flavour and the taste and the smell alone was enough to make me think, actually, I kind of want one of these in our house for our drinking water. So I started researching it, and I nearly bought one of these, the Berkey. And I sort of think they're really expensive, but you know, it lasts forever in your house and so on. So luckily, I found all this out before I committed to this. The reality of the situation is this problem where we have the Berkey water filter, which is the most popular water filter in America. These things were super trendy. They were, you know, getting magazine articles about them. They look great. They're these stainless steel things in your kitchen. It's kind of, you can see how there was a kind of status symbol thing attached to these. People would show them off. But actually, the more I looked into this, the more I was convinced of their importance, but the more alarming the whole thing became, because it turns out these Berkey things were actually banned in America. The filters they use were classified by the EPA as a pesticide, and they were issued this stop sale order, and they've got this ongoing legal battle now and all this. Did you ever see? I was kind of thinking, you know, maybe there is no science to this. Maybe it is just one of these fads and these scams. But then alongside this, I was researching this and, you know, finding out about these kinds of filters that are lab tested. And this was where it got really interesting, because there's a UK model of this called the British Berkefeld. Turns out the Berkey was licensed from this original British version. But what they did was they stopped using the British Berkefeld filters and instead made their own. They made this faster flowing filter, but they never got it certified. Whereas the British version is certified. It takes all of this stuff out of the water, bacteria, microplastics, heavy metals, pharmaceuticals, forever chemicals. All of this stuff is certified to remove from the water, including, of course, the chlorine, which is the big one, the one you can immediately tell when it's working. I don't think there's any doubt that the Berkey ones will take chlorine out. I think that's kind of an easy thing for them to do. But they didn't get certification for any of this other stuff. And we know that they were designed to filter water much faster. That was kind of their selling point. Much faster than these original British ones. And the main difference between these kinds of filters is the British one uses a ceramic filter. And this is fascinating because this is a 200-year-old product. The original one of these was a ceramic filter inside a ceramic version of this. Instead of stainless steel, it used to be actually a ceramic container as well. And they would use this ceramic filtration for the water itself. And it was very slow, and it was appointed by the royal family and all of this. The company was called Royal Doulton, and they are known for their ceramics as a British brand as well. And they made these filters that were used by the royal family to purify their drinking water. And it turns out this ceramic filtration technology is incredibly fine pore size of 0.2 microns. And the Berkey version of that used a much bigger pore size of 1 micron. And all of that was sort of thinking, okay, well, this is really fascinating. We've got this UK one, which is fully certified. We've got this US one, which is the popular one that everyone knows about. That's not certified. It's pretty obvious that you want to get the certified one. And the interesting thing is they're way cheaper than the Berkey ones. What's interesting about these gravity-fed water filters is they actually share the cartridges. You can use the ultra-Sterisil cartridges, which is what the British one uses, in a Berkey filter. If you've already got the Berkey and you're sort of thinking, well, you know, these things are banned now, what do I do? I'm lumbered with this really expensive thing. It's not a problem. You just replace the filter with the ultra stericyl ones, which is the certified ones, then probably other certified filters as well. It's a very standard format, this idea of the gravity fed filter being two containers, one that sits on top of the other, and it's literally just a sort of stainless steel base in the top container with holes in, and you clamp the filter each side. You put it over the hole, you screw it on from underneath, and that then is a filter. It's like a candle shape that sits over that hole. The water then just drips through that under gravity, and it does take ages with this British one. It's a good couple of hours for it to drain through. There's also these stories about mass poisoning. So there's this case in Cornwall. This is the worst mass poisoning in British history or something like that. And this to me was just the biggest signal, and it's not quite that simple, we'll get on to why in a second, but this was the biggest signal to me that we shouldn't just trust our tap water. This idea, like if you're questioning your tap water, you sound a bit like a conspiracy theorist. Like, we're given this water is safe, so why are we filtering it? First of all, the chlorine is disgusting. Like, there's no question that. But I think there is this fundamental question that we can't quite trust the big corporations that are supplying our drinking water. And yes, it sounds a little bit conspiracy theory-ish. So this situation with the Cornish water poisoning, there was this time when a delivery driver poured 20 tons of aluminium sulfate into a tank that was ready for consumption by 20,000 people. It was a water supply for 20,000 people. It became poisoned. So it's alarming enough that there were no safety measures in place to have actually prevented this, on a kind of procedural level. But what really was the most, tragic and alarming and, confirming to me that we can't trust these people is that they knew about this, but they didn't tell the public for 16 days. All these anecdotal stories about how this played out, people were grumbling about having symptoms and they were told it was fine, and they were told just to drink the water with squash in it to hide the taste, and that it was completely safe. But as people got to the point where they were dying later, it wasn't sort of directly related, but they did post-mortems on them. And their levels of aluminium in their brains were sort of like 20 times the normal level. And, this, as time went on, just became more and more clear that this was just a really serious problem that happened. And they tried to cover it up. And the fact that they tried to cover it up is just this, we can't trust them. I don't think there's any recovering from that. It's like, why would you assume that, a company is suddenly not going to behave in that way if they think they can get away with it? So for me, that was, that's the biggest sort of signal that I want to do a little bit more here with the water that's coming through the pipes, not least because sometimes you can taste weird things. Like, I'm sure I've tasted a sort of diesel taste in the water once or twice. Like, where's that coming from? And actually, I remember in Exeter, we did have a situation where we were told to stop drinking the water because they did have a diesel contamination in the water supply there as well. So now, of course, the reality is not all of these things are filtered out by the filter, and that is the case with this aluminium sulfate poisoning situation. These gravity-fed ultra-stericyl filters would not have done anything about that. But we do know that they do filter out all of these other kinds of things. So if there was a problem with contamination of one of those other things, at least you're covered for that. But it is, obviously just this, the most alarming story is one that actually wouldn't have made any difference with or without the water filter. But it is this signal of sort of, how mistakes can happen in these water supplies and how they will seek to cover it up rather than protect you and keep you safe. So that was just one of these big kind of elements of all of this. So chlorine is interesting in that actually if you pour yourself a glass of water and then leave that glass out overnight, the chlorine itself will evaporate and you've got rid of the chlorine. So that sort of solves the chlorine problem. But it is more complicated than that, because these days most sort of cities and big urban areas use chloramine instead of chlorine in the water, and that does not evaporate overnight. You need to filter it out if you want to get rid of it. So that's where these filters come in. They will take chlorine and chloramine out. And if you look into this and you sort of look at the research on the impacts of chlorine on your gut microbiome, now this is something that's very interesting to me. Over the years, I've had pretty weird digestive issues that I've been experimenting with diet and all of these kinds of things. And the natural bacteria in your digestion is quite interesting. It's obviously a very important part in the way that you sort of feel like well or not well comes from that. So it's not actually you, it's the bacteria inside you. And we know that chlorine kills bacteria. There's no reason it's going to stop killing bacteria just because you're drinking it, as opposed to it being in pipework, right? So it sort of stands to reason a little bit, but there is science and research that kind of proves this as well. There's all sorts of things that demonstrate that the the bacteria in the gut are changed as a result of consuming chlorine at sort of tap water safe levels. Some of these are animal studies. Obviously, you have to take those with a pinch of salt in terms of how relevant they are to us. And there are other things where it sort of appears that this is much worse for kids than adults and these other kinds of studies. But it's enough for me to think, actually, considering that there is just no cost associated apart from the cost of these filters, which is minimal, there's no real barrier, there's no real compromise or penalty for doing this. So clearly water without chlorine is going to be better than water with chlorine on any level, proof or no proof. It's like the one without the chlorine is clearly a more suitable form for you to be drinking it in, isn't it? So considering the barrier to entry here, I think this was a no-brainer for me, and I was absolutely convinced by this, and I'm super happy that we've got one of these in the house. And it was just such an interesting kind of research rabbit hole to get to that point.